everybody, my name is Megan. If you're new to my channel, then welcome. And if you are returning, maybe some of these storylines you might have already heard from previous videos, but I thought I would just condense them all into one video, story time type situation where I just shared my stories of conception. I have 3 stories plus a possible 4th to share. So I thought I would just get into what we did to conceive those cycles and how it all came about. The first time that my husband and I conceived was over Christmas of 2015. At the time, we were not living together. We were not living on the same continent even. I was 12 months into my immigration process to move to him here in Sweden. And we felt like we had wasted just like an eternity of time waiting for my residence permit. We wanted to start trying to conceive. I was 31 years old. I was told by my OBGYN that it could take up to 2 years for us to conceive because I had multiple surgeries on my cervix during my 20s. And so we sort of felt like we were up against this like impossible odds and the clock. You know, I just felt the clock ticking. So I came to visit him for a month over the holidays. So I arrived on December 16th and I left on January 16th. And I had been tracking my cycles before that using the Clue app. I had been tracking them for about 2 years. I had quit the pill, birth control, at sometime in 2013 because I decided I didn't want to be on hormonal birth control anymore. So I was just tracking my cycles using this app. And for the most part, it was always right. My cycles were 26 to 28 days long, and so I just sort of trusted the app's fertile window that it told me I had. And I thought that the body was this clock, and it was that way for everyone. I had no idea then what I know now about women's cycles. So I really feel like this first story I'm sharing is pure luck. But anyway, when I visited my husband, my period started about 2 or 3 days after I had arrived. And so a couple weeks later, when my fertile window came, we had sex like 5 days before ovulation, 4 days before ovulation, 2 days before ovulation, and 1 day after ovulation. Ovulation, based on my app. I really don't know when I actually ovulated, but according to my app, that's how we timed it. We didn't use any lube. We didn't do anything special. We didn't do anything special. We just had sex in that fertile window, and I hadn't been on birth control for a couple years, and I had started taking prenatals 3 months prior to this cycle that we tried. They were just the Whole Foods brand, store brand prenatals, and that's all I took. I felt like I knew pretty much without a doubt that we had actually conceived that cycle about a week later because I had all these symptoms that were totally abnormal to me. My boobs were so painful and so sore that I couldn't even lay on my stomach when I slept. I couldn't even bear to wear a bra. They were so sore. I had changes in my cervical fluid. It was like in copious amounts, and it was sort of like this watery, milky, it looked like milk pretty much. It was like watered down white CM. I had been Googling a lot, like, is this a pregnancy symptom? Is this a pregnancy symptom? Just like anyone does, you know, when they're trying to conceive. I went a little crazy. And then 3 days before my missed period, I started to have some mild nausea at night, but it was always when we were in the car. And where we live, there's a lot of like windy country roads we have to go around. So I actually thought that I was just having car sickness at the time. I didn't really put 2 and 2 together. And my last symptoms I had were 1 day before my missed period, I was starting to get so emotional. Everything made me cry. And on top of that, I started to crave red meat and oranges. Oranges was like a little weird, but the red meat, I was vegan at the time. And so to me, I'm like, I wonder if I'm starting to crave iron. Actually, maybe this is a symptom, you know? So I sort of had it in my head that I was pregnant. My husband was adamant that we were not pregnant. He thought it was impossible to get pregnant on the first cycle, especially when we factored in the jet lag I was going through and all the stress we were under because of this super long immigration process, and also because of like my cervical issues and my doctor telling me to expect for it to take 2 years before we sought help because of the scar tissue I had on my cervix. So we decided to take a pregnancy test. I knew so little about the process of TTC that I didn't even know I was supposed to wait for the morning to take a pregnancy test. So the day before I flew out, we decided to buy a clear blue test, the one that showed like a positive if it's positive and a negative if it's negative. It was not digital. And we took it at 7:30 at night the day before I left to go home. And so I peed on the stick, and I just remember sitting there thinking, oh my God, this is so surreal. Like, I've spent the past 31 years trying to not get pregnant, and here I am, like, peeing on a stick, hoping it's positive. It was such a surreal feeling. Put the cap on, set the test down, started my timer, walked out into the living room, sat down on the couch next to my husband, and we just awkwardly sat there for what felt like an eternity, but it was probably just a couple seconds, and we were like, what do we do? I wanted to be the one to go in and look at the test to see if it was positive or negative so that I could mentally prepare myself for the disappointment if it was negative. We knew that we would be getting our immigration decision within the next 6 to 8 weeks. So I really wanted to be able to leave Sweden and go home knowing that I had a piece of my husband with me, because it was going to be the last time I'd see him before getting our decision and me selling all my stuff and quitting my job and moving. So part of me was super convinced and part of me was so hoping that I had this piece of him with me that I could go home with. But he wanted to be the one to go in and see it. So I agreed. If he wanted to be that active in this, then I wasn't going to take that experience from him. So he goes into the bathroom, he gets the test. 2 seconds later, he comes around the corner of the hallway, looking at me white as a ghost. His eyes were like this big, and his jaw was just like, his mouth was as open as it could be, and he goes, "It is positive." And I immediately started jumping on the couch like, I knew it, I knew it, I knew it, I knew it. And he was just running around the house going like, oh, F word, oh, F word, oh, F word, we're gonna be effing parents. And I'm just like over here jumping on the couch, freaking out. We were such a mess. And then he calls his sister right away. I called my sister right away. And then we went to his parents' house at like 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night with this test, like waving this pee stick around saying, oh my God, look it. It was really exciting. And it was so sentimental going back home the next day and just like him saying, take care of my baby for me while you're gone. And I was just like, oh my God. So that was the first time we conceived. The second time we conceived was a lot different. It was a little more than 1 year later that we started trying again for our next baby. That first time we conceived, our daughter was born in September of 2016, and then in January of 2018, January 2018 was when we tried again. So our daughter was 1 year and 3 months old at that time. Now, in that time of her being born up until the day that we started TTCing, so that was like, 15 months or so, I had started obsessively binging videos on YouTube. I started out watching birth stories and L&D vlogs, and then I got really into gender reveals and oh my gosh, when I learned about live pregnancy tests on YouTube, that was like the end of my life. I have not stopped watching those, and it's been like 9 or 10 months that I've been watching them now. But once we decided we were ready to start thinking about TTCing, I started watching TTC vlogs on YouTube. And I kind of like found my way into this world of secondary infertility. I knew I was going to be 34 years old once we started trying again. I was 32 when my daughter was born. And even though we miraculously conceived on our first try, especially miraculously considering the fact that we didn't really do much. Like, I didn't know about OPKs and BBTs and like all these special supplements you can take. I didn't know about any of that. I just had this feeling that because I was so close to being of advanced maternal age, and also just having this sense that lightning could not possibly strike twice, I felt like I was up against a mountain again. So I had educated myself several months prior to us actually trying, and I had learned about OPKs. I had learned about basal body temping. I had learned about my cycle and like the oddities about my cycle. I had shorter cycles. They were like 23 to 25 days long. I had very short periods that only lasted about 2 to 3 days. I stopped producing fertile cervical fluid during my ovulatory window after my daughter was born. And I don't know if that's because I'm older or if it's because my hormones are just different. But I had noticed with tracking from everything I had learned on the YouTube community that I had some issues that maybe I would want to focus a little bit of attention on. So I started taking prenatals really, really early. So we tried to conceive for our second baby for the first time in January of 2018. But in July of 2017, I started taking prenatals, I started taking strong probiotics, I started taking vitamin D, and I started taking prenatal omega-3 fatty acids. And then I added on like red raspberry leaf, and then I added on evening primrose oil, and then I added on like L-arginine and ubiquinol and grapeseed extract. And I have videos in the early, like all of my earlier videos on this channel talk about when I added these supplements on, why I added them on, what they do. So if you're interested, you can go back and watch. But I sort of had this cocktail down by the time it was January 2018, because I wanted to prepare my body. However, we had gone through a lot of really stressful times around the holidays of 2017 into 2018. So we had agreed that we actually were not going to start trying to conceive until April of 2018. So, but I was still taking OPKs, and in January my husband saw my positive OPK, and he knew from me like blabbing about my cycles all the time that because of my ovulation pains, I believed that I ovulated 24 hours after getting my first positive. So he saw that positive, and like spur of the moment he says, let's just try this month. And I'm like, this is crazy, but whatever, let's do it. So we used Pre-Seed, which is a fertility-friendly lube, because like my lady situation down there has just not been the same since having my daughter. I am dry as a bone, always. So we used that lube, and we had sex once on the day of my positive OPK. And then 12 days later, I took a pregnancy test. If I can figure out how to insert a clip of the video, I will. Otherwise, I will put in a picture right now. I came up with an extremely faint, positive wand faux test at 12 DPO. Super, super faint. I took another one in the afternoon, and then I felt like that test might have been invalid because where the test line was, I actually saw 2 lines and not 1. So I don't know what happened, but I did have those 2 tests. I did see very, very faint pink lines on those tests. It was 12 DPO, and later that evening, my period started, and it was like a pretty heavy flow for me, and it was bright red from the beginning. Both of those things are very abnormal for me. In all the months that I have tracked my cycle, I always have a 13-day luteal phase, and then my period starts on 14 DPO. So the fact that my period started on 12 DPO was very weird for me. Number 2, I always have 1 to 2 days of brown spotting before my period starts. And then my period starts very, very light, almost like spotting, and then like 12 to 24 hours later is when my actual period starts. But this time I went in full flow, bright red from the get-go. So I will not know to this day if I had a chemical pregnancy that cycle or not. I really don't know. But that was some like abnormal situation that happened for us. But we just brushed it off. We didn't think anything of it. We had sex once. It was a spur of the moment thing, and that's that. We skipped February, and then in March of 2018, we decided, let's actually try. Let's try for real. The timing feels right. Let's just do it. So that cycle, we had... Sorry, I had to consult my fertility friend app to get this correctly. So in my March cycle, we had sex on cycle day 6, cycle day 8, and cycle day 9. That particular cycle, I got my first positive OPK on cycle day 9, which was quite early for me. Usually I don't get my first positive until like cycle day 10 or 11, so I was not expecting to get it that soon. So we had sex 3 times that cycle. So it was the day of my positive OPK, the day before that, and then 2 days before that. So on four days before my positive OPK, 1 day before my positive OPK, and then the day of my positive OPK. And then my BBT and my ovulation pains confirmed that I did in fact ovulate 24 hours after my positive OPK. So I felt like that cycle, we really genuinely gave it our all. You know, we were trying to do that sperm meets egg plan where you have sex every other day of your fertile window, and then like the day of your positive OPK the next day, and then the next day or whatever. We did our best. And then I was temping, and I told myself I was not going to take a pregnancy test until the day my period was due, but on 13 DPO, which again is the very end of my luteal phase, my period should have started the day after that, I noticed that my basal body temperature continued to rise. And so, or was it 12 DPO? Was it 12 DPO and then 13? Yeah, it was 12 DPO that I actually took my first test. And then 13 DPO again because my basal body temperature had continued to increase. Once again, I will try to put up a video of that here. If not, I'll put up a picture, but I registered a very faint positive on 12 DPO. So this is completely negative. Well, I think this is negative. Yeah, this is, you guys, this is negative. I mean, actually there's, I can't. Oh God, I don't, oh my gosh. Okay, this test strip actually doesn't look much like my other two, which were just so clearly negative. But this one I actually think I see it. Oh, it doesn't really show up on the video. And then again on 13 DPO. Oh boy. Oh my God. Oh, that's a line. Oh my God, I can't believe it. Oh man. And it was also faint, but it was definitely a positive. I went out the next day and I got like a clear blue digital test and a clear blue plus or minus blue dye test, and I continued to temp. And in those first few days, I was registering positive tests. So I was super excited. I didn't think much of it in the very, very beginning. I did get a positive digital test on the day before Easter. So it was the last day of March, which was a Saturday. I remember taking the digital in the bathroom of a family member's house because we were having like an Easter luncheon. It says it should show up within 3 minutes. I don't know how much time has passed. We've got to be close. And, you know, the tests were still coming out positive, but I was starting to have a lot of doubts because all of a sudden my basal body temperature dropped and my lines were not getting darker. So I wish I had actually studied this cycle to remember my days and datings freshly, but I believe that I got 5 days past my missed period, so I would have been 4 weeks plus 5 days before I started to bleed. And I knew that I was having a chemical because my lines at the very end were getting lighter despite my urine being super concentrated. And I'll never forget that on April Fool's Day, the day after I got my positive digital, I went into the bathroom to grab that digital just to look at it one more time, and it was blank. There was nothing on the screen. And I actually accused my husband, because I had bought a digital 2-pack, I had accused my husband of taking out the second unused digital and opening it. And I went up to him and I'm like, why would you open the second digital? I was not ready to take it yet. He's like, girl, I didn't touch anything. And it dawned on me that the battery had run out on the digital that I had taken. And it was just so devastatingly poetic that on April Fool's Day, and later that day, I believe it was later that day or the next day I started to bleed, it was that day, on April Fool's Day, that my digital battery would run out and then I would start to bleed. So I had a for real confirmed chemical pregnancy in March of 2018, which ended on April Fool's Day. I had it in my mind that I wanted to skip the month of April. I did not want to TTC. I wanted to let my body recover. And I started taking maca root that cycle. And just to try something new, to try to balance my hormones, maybe like freshen up my body, because at this point, after that chemical happened, I started thinking about what had happened in January, and then I sort of had it in my head that I may have just had 2 back-to-back chemicals. And sort of to this day, I do believe that. I know people will have their opinions, but in my heart, I do believe I had a super early loss in January. I know it doesn't matter, but psychologically it did for me at the time. And so I wanted to just perk up my body and my hormones and let April be and try again in May. But in those first days of taking maca root, I don't know if it was actually because of my chemical pregnancy or the maca, but I was feeling fresh, you guys. Like, my sex drive was through the roof, my energy was through the roof, I was feeling so strong and so good, and I was positive that I was going to have a good egg that cycle. And if you've watched any of my previous videos, you will have heard me talk about that. I had this sense in my heart that I was going to be producing a strong egg, and I realized, you know what, we need to go for it. We need to just try this cycle. Unfortunately, my husband got like super sick just before my fertile window started, and like in the very beginning of my fertile window, to the point where he couldn't lift a finger. I was spoon feeding him soup. And then a couple days after that, he had to go on a work trip, and he was gone for the entire rest of my fertile window, and I was so bummed out because I felt like this was our chance and it was going to be blown. So I was taking OPKs, I was filming them for my channel. You all might have seen my video saying I'm praying for a negative OPK because my husband was out of town, and I realized that my ovulation was delayed that cycle, very likely because of the chemical pregnancy I had. And so I had timed it out so that if only my positive OPK wouldn't happen until like Friday or Saturday, we would have the smallest window to baby dance once before I ovulated. And so like every day I was taking an OPK, I was like, please God, let this be negative. I just need to get to the weekend. And sure enough, I got my positive OPK on cycle day 13, which was actually Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th, after miscarrying on April Fool's Day, so take that for what you will. I got my positive OPK, and my husband got home. He wasn't supposed to come home until Saturday morning, but he got home Friday night. So we baby danced once. He was still sick. He did not want to have anything to do with it. I had to pull out, ladies, I had to pull out all the stops to get it up to have sex that one time, and it was such a chore for him. Yeah, he was not happy about having to do it. But we had sex that one time, and then I ovulated something like, 12 hours later. I think I had my ovulation pains. So we used pre-seed again that one time, and I don't know if I mentioned it, but we did use pre-seed in the January time and also the March time we used pre-seed. But we used pre-seed again this time. I did everything. I put my legs up in the air, like I would not get out of bed. I just laid there and let the semen just marinate in my body. And then, and that was it. So it was just that one time, and I really wasn't feeling hopeful because it was so close to when I ovulated, and again, it was just one time. But I was so thankful that we at least got to have that one opportunity so that I didn't feel like I had wasted the whole cycle. So then I was basal body temping. So I was taking my BBTs, and that whole cycle was so weird. My chart was just all over the place. There was a point in time where I actually didn't even think I did ovulate because I had such a dramatic fallback rise on like 2 DPO or something like that. Anyway, I was tracking my symptoms though, and I had something like backache and menstrual-like cramps on 6 or 7 DPO. And on 6, 7, and 8 DPO, I had like remarkable thirst. Those were really my only symptoms that I had. I took my first pregnancy test on 9 DPO using a one-step test. I thought maybe I saw a line, but I wasn't quite sure, and so I counted it as a negative. And then on 10 DPO, I took a WandFo and a one-step to see if I could confirm what I saw the day prior on a WandFo. The one step looked negative again, but I wasn't quite sure because I saw like this weird indent, but I don't know. But the WandFo, I did see a line, super faint. So then on 11 DPO, I tested again, and sure enough, my WandFo line was very obvious. My one-step line wasn't so obvious, but it was there. I took a clear blue digital, and it was positive. I hate these tests. There's a line. Oh my god. Okay, we'll look at the one step first. I'm pregnant. Oh, let's look at the... Oh my god. Oh my god. And that was the beginning of this pregnancy. Now, to go backward a little bit with my March pregnancy, when I got my first positive tests, I got so excited that I took pictures and I texted the pictures to my husband while he was at work. And I'm like, why is he not responding? Why? Like, this is huge news. He knew I was going to be testing today. And so I'm waiting and waiting, and like 20 minutes goes by, and I finally call him and I'm like, have you seen the pictures? He goes, what pictures? And I go, hello, I just sent you like pregnancy test pictures. And he goes, I didn't receive anything. So I look at my phone, and it turns out I had texted those pictures to my daughter's preschool, which goes to 9 people's work cell phones. I will never know like who actually, I'm sure everyone saw it, I don't know, but 9 people have access to the phone that receives those texts, and everyone probably saw pregnancy tests that I sent them, and like 30 minutes had gone by before I recognized it. And of course it's in the middle of the day when the kids are there at school, so I know they got them. So then I had to frantically text, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to send you these. So I had decided in April, or just whenever, I would get my next positive, whenever that would be, that I was going to keep it a secret. I was going to come up with a very clever way to tell my husband. That didn't happen really. I kept it a secret on 9 DPO, I kept it a secret on 10 DPO, but on 11 DPO, when I had that positive digital, I waited until my husband came home, then I brought him a beer and sat him down on the couch and tried to be all serious, and I'm like, I need to talk to you about something. And I had the digital in my bra, and he goes, oh God, what is it? And so I pulled out the digital, and I'm just like, are you ready to try this again? So, not really sure what happened in January, but March we definitely got pregnant, we definitely miscarried, and 13 days later we definitely got pregnant again. So my husband must have turbo sperm, but I also really, really, really credit everything I've learned on the TTC communities in YouTube, and also the TTC groups on Facebook, for teaching me what I needed to know to increase my odds of conception as much as I possibly could have. Like I said, I was temping, I was taking OPKs, I had my cycles locked down to a science. I knew exactly when I needed to have sex. I had read articles and research studies shared in these groups about, like, scientifically and statistically, when are your highest odds of conceiving, you know, which is to have sex 2 days before you ovulate, incidentally. And all the supplements I was taking to increase my cervical fluid, knowing to use pre-seed, eating pineapple core, you know, during days 1 to 5 DPO. All of these things I learned from the TTC communities, and I implemented them in my own thing, and I truly believe it's why I succeeded as quickly as I did. So let this video be sort of a contribution back to the community for what worked for us. And anyway, today I am, let's see, it's Saturday, so Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I am 15 weeks and 2 days pregnant now with our April conception baby. Rainbow baby, I guess you could call it. And yeah, those are my 3, possibly 4 conception stories. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Have a good day. Like and subscribe if you would like to follow along with my pregnancy journey. Otherwise, I will just see you all later. Bye.